Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to this SolarWinds MSP webinar, an introduction to SolarWinds EDR. I'm Dave Sobel. I'm the Senior Director of MSP Evangelism here at SolarWinds, focused on making sure that you get all the latest and greatest information, everything you need to help grow your business and get the best out of your relationship with SolarWinds. The only thing anybody ever cares about from my career is the fact that I did own and operate my own MSP for a decade. So I come from the solution provider space, know how to think like a solution provider, and then take a look at all of these technologies through that perspective. Before we dive into the content today, got a little bit of housekeeping to make sure that we take care of. The first thing is everyone is on mute. It's not because we don't want to hear from you, it's just we want to make sure you get a great audio experience. So if you do have something to say or a question to ask, go ahead and use the question window to ask us questions. We'll be taking those as we go along and have a dedicated Q&A session at the end. If you're having any audio or video issues, go ahead and speak up in that same questions window. We've experienced a lot of these before for people. We're really good at figuring out what's wrong and giving you some practical advice to get it fixed. And finally, we always get asked, is this being recorded? It absolutely is. You'll get the opportunity to get a link of that after the show is over. This is all part of our MSP Institute. You can get information from MSP experts and leaders. It's all available in our Customer Success Center. Just go to solarwindsmsp.com, click on the support link, and you'll get access to those resources. So let's dive in. We've got a great presentation today and a great presenter. I'm going to introduce Mr. Eric Anthony. Eric is on the customer experience team with me, and he's focused definitely on delivering that best experience. He also comes with that break fix and MSP knowledge, having owned businesses in the space for 16 years. And he and I have been together here at the SolarWinds, dating back to Logic Now organization for now over 5 years, isn't it, Eric?
Yep, that's right. In fact, we met at a trade show right as we were both starting this gig.
Just a couple of years ago. So now that you guys know who Eric is, Eric, why don't you take it from here?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Just to clarify, the 16 years plus the 5 years adds up to 21 years. So yes, I did start my break fix company when I was 12. Just kidding. My role here at SolarWinds is to create content like this, make sure that we're engaging with you guys to make sure that your businesses are as successful as possible using our tools. Today, we're going to be talking about our EDR solution. So let's start off with a poll question. Are you already using an EDR or next generation AV solution in your IT services business? And this will give us kind of a point that we can look at today to see whether or not you guys are using an existing solution or looking for diving into the waters of EDR for the first time.
While those poll results are pouring in, we are kind of expecting that many of you are exploring the options now, because this is definitely a newer space. And we'll give you some sense of how it all fits together. Does it work next to a traditional AV? Eric will walk through all of those details today.
Yep, and as a matter of fact, those are some of the questions that come up the most. Like, does it sit alongside with a legacy AV? What is the pricing? Those different types of questions we will definitely be covering either throughout the webinar today or at the end in the dedicated Q&A section. All right, so we have results. So 37% of you say yes, you're already using an EDR or next generation AV solution. 49% are saying no, and 14% aren't sure. I assume that 14% is because we're not sure about what is the definition between a legacy AV and a next gen AV, and we're going to be covering that in quite a bit of detail in the webinar. All right, so let's go ahead and get started into some of the content. So the first thing we're going to look at is we're going to look at the changing threat landscape, because the first question is, why are we looking at a new type of AV or a new type of endpoint detection and response? So we're going to look at the timeline of viruses and malware. We're going to talk about the new definitions or the new lexicon of terms that exists around these new threats, what makes these new threats different from the things we've seen before, the life cycle of a piece of malware and why that matters in terms of these advanced detection and remediation. And that also brings us to the advanced remediation. We're going to talk about what the next gen AV or EDR solutions do to bring about a more advanced process of remediating a device that has been infected. So when it comes to new threats, let's talk about the history for a little bit. So way back in 1987, we started seeing the first AV solutions come out. Of course, these AV solutions were based on signatures. You know, a file came in, it looked like a certain hash, you know, it matched a heuristic, and that's how we knew that it was a virus and we could kill it and quarantine it. Then we roll on to about 2005, where we started seeing the proliferation of ransomware attacks. Now, these ransomware attacks had a different component to them, where the people deploying this malware were now making money off of it, and that's what caused the proliferation, obviously. Once people could start making money on it, it made it a criminal activity in terms of a revenue for criminals that they could go out and attack, you know, something different. In 2017, we get to the point where we're starting to see so many new samples of malware a day that it's exceeding 350,000 new samples a day. That's 350,000 new signatures per day that a legacy AV has to keep up with. And then if we look as recently as just last year, Cisco predicted that 1 in 4 desktop PCs would be infected in 2018. That is 25% of not just your customers, but that's 25% of all the endpoints that you could be monitoring as an IT service provider. So what are some of the new key definitions that we're seeing in the new threat landscape? Well, polymorphic malware. This is malware that changes itself so that it continually enables itself to hide from those signature-based AV solutions. Supply chain attacks, where a piece of malware actually hides itself within a known good piece of software so that it can attack through that vector. Compressed code and packers, where, you know, like zip files and things like that, where it can obfuscate itself by hiding within that type of file. A fileless malware, so this is malware, typically a drive-by, you know, from your web browser, where you get a file on your computer, but it's only executing as a process in memory. It never actually hits the drive. And a lot of legacy AVs depend on a file being created to scan it for that signature. And then, of course, the solutions that we have to deal with the new threat landscape: EDR, or endpoint detection and response, next gen AV, or sometimes called next generation endpoint protection. So these new threats, what makes them new? How have they evolved? So traditional AV, like we've talked about, is based on signatures. The latest evolution of those malwares do everything they can do to avoid detection by signature. So again, we're talking about compressed code, fileless malware, and then two that we didn't talk about already are scripts and malicious documents. The new pieces of malware love to hide within those or be downloaded by a script within one of those scripts or documents so that they can, again, attack through that vector. And this obviously necessitates an additional methodology of protecting your endpoints. Now, when we talk about the life cycle of a threat, this is protecting an endpoint across time by whatever that malware is doing. So traditional AV works in the pre-execution time frame. But if it doesn't match a signature, we need to be able to watch the process that's spawned by that file and any additional processes spawned by that file, scripts and things like that, that may turn bad even if they haven't matched a signature. So what we need to do is we also need to look at the on execution and post execution life cycles of these processes. So quarantine and kill is still an important part of the pre-execution detection and remediation. So we don't leave that part out. That's still part of a next-gen AV solution or an EDR solution. But other protections are necessary to remediate the threats that are not discovered by those signatures. And we need to be able to perform other actions like doing file system rollbacks, being able to take advantage of shadow copy to restore files that have been encrypted, uh, restoration of registry entries that may have been changed by those processes, being able to isolate a device from the rest of the network so that that device can't spread the malware to other devices within the environment. And then, of course, you want to be able to look at the attack history of these things so you can see where they came from, what things they affected, and so on. So it's very important to look not only at the pre-execution or before a file is executed, but also what is that process doing after it's been executed, or what are the other scripts or processes that are being run by that process? What are they doing? And then during post-execution, if we have found something to be bad, can we go back and restore everything back to the way it was before that process was running? So that brings us to our second poll question. How likely are you to promote an EDR solution to your customers? So let's spend a couple of minutes.
And obviously here we're asking kind of where you're thinking about calling it out versus a general security perspective. We hope you're all talking lots of security with your customers because we know that's a whole area of interest for them. But we're really interested in understanding, are you specifically looking at this kind of messaging?
That's correct. We want to make sure, EDR is something that's relatively new. And so is this something that you guys are looking to include in your solutions that you're starting to promote to both existing clients and prospects? All right, looks like we're going to have results here in a second. There we go. So very low numbers on the not likely, kind of what we expected, what we've seen from other polls that we've done. 27% say somewhat likely and 72% say very likely. And I would say this falls right in line with the general concerns and questions around security right now and how hot of a topic it is in terms of the messaging that you're giving to your clients in terms of security. So those are really good numbers. All right, so when it comes to next generation antivirus, what makes it different from legacy AV solutions? So we're going to look at the limits of legacy AV, how that compares to the next generation of AV solutions, what are some of the end user benefits, and then also important is the benefits to you as the IT service provider or MSP. So the limits of legacy AV, let's go over some statistics first. In 2018, you can see there 82% of small to medium-sized businesses that experienced a cyber attack say that it evaded their traditional antivirus solutions. So that is a really big number to say, for the ones that did experience some type of breach, some type of ransomware, something like that, that it evaded their traditional antivirus solutions. So legacy AV, like we've talked about before, is based on signatures and static AI engines that are built to recognize malicious files before they run. So it's very hard to, especially since they're doing everything they can to evade the legacy AV, those pieces of malware, you can see how it's pretty easy for them to evade a legacy AV without having the behavioral component to it and the AI component to it as well. Now, since 2012, the volume of new malware samples has surpassed the ability of traditional AV solutions to stay up to date. And that's simply because so many new versions are coming out all the time that it's just too much to keep up with. The website AV Test now registers almost 350,000 new malware samples a day. And so in order for traditional AV signatures to be created for those and then updates to be downloaded, that's a lot of things per day for new signatures to be created for. And then there's the lag time between the time the signature is created and the endpoint actually downloads that signature. So how does next generation help? Well, first of all, again, next generation AV solutions come under different names. Endpoint detection and response, next generation AV, or next generation endpoint protection. And the big differences, the key things that set them apart from legacy AV is number one, they monitor processes during execution. And that's so that we can have a program that looks good from the start, but then goes bad. We know what those behaviors are and we can stop that process in its tracks. Now, of course, it's already run, it's already started to do things. So the second half of this solution and key differentiator is that a next generation solution is going to be recording changes to the endpoint as processes are being done so that those actions can be rolled back. So when a malicious program makes things like registry entry changes or encrypts files, we can go back and restore those back to their known good state. Now, usually these next generation AV solutions include both a static AI as well as a behavioral AI. One of the things that distinguishes the SolarWinds EDR package from some other next generation solutions is that it does not require an internet connection to the cloud in order to process or analyze those processes against those two AI engines. So that's critical when you're talking about devices that either for security reasons or just for employee productivity reasons don't have access to the internet. The classic example that I'll give is, say, manufacturing devices that are out on a manufacturing floor don't typically have access to the internet because they just don't need it, but they very frequently are programmed or programs are updated to them via a USB thumb drive. Now that thumb drive may be infected, and if you put it into a machine, you want that static AI or that behavioral AI engine to be able to analyze the processes that may run off of that USB stick without access to the internet. So it becomes very important in a lot of environments that the device doesn't need to reach out to the internet to process all of those AI engine type of things. Now, malicious documents and scripts, the next generation solutions can look into those documents and those scripts to look for code that may be malicious and pick those things out and detect them as a threat. Of course, fileless exploits are big because of their ability to not be recognized because they don't exist in a file somewhere, so it's very hard to match a signature against them. You need to be able to watch the process to see if it's something that's recognizable or goes bad. And then, of course, lateral movement. One of the big things about next generation AV solutions, and the SolarWinds EDR package does this as well, and that is protect against lateral movement. And that's where you can isolate a machine where a threat has been detected from being able to access the rest of the network and then go in and remediate that. And then, of course, quarantine and kill, we spoke about before, is still very important to the execution of an AV solution. So as soon as a threat is detected, we want to be able to quarantine and kill the process and the file that it was originally executed from. And then, of course, a next generation solution is going to include that ability to roll back files and registry entries in the case that we detect a process goes bad after it's executed. So what are some of the end user benefits? So of course, less downtime for your customer. Sometimes this is hard to measure in customer productivity, end user productivity, but it is significant, so it's worth mentioning to the customer. Faster endpoint performance, because the next generation AV does not depend as much on frequent scans. The logic here is that a traditional AV solution, every time it downloads new signatures, it really should scan the device so that it can pick up any files that were downloaded before those signatures came out that may be malicious. With a next-gen AV, because it's watching processes for behavior as they're running, then you have better zero-day protection. You're not dependent on those signatures. Those signatures are not going to be out of date, and so therefore you're not as dependent on the frequency of those scans to find malware that may have come onto the device before a signature was created for it. And then you have faster remediation to a last known good state. So if something does happen to a device, you can typically get it back up and running much faster in the case of a next-gen AV rather than a legacy AV product where once the files are encrypted, you're either going to have to restore from backup or you're going to have to do a nuke and pave and then restore from a backup. So why should you as an IT service provider or as an MSP sell next-gen AV? Well, the most important one probably right now, because security is such a big thing, is decreased churn. The statistics that we have show that 4 out of 5 customers who churn from an MSP do so because of a security issue. Even when the security issue was not your responsibility because maybe they opted out of what you recommended they get and that's why they were infected, they're still going to look to you, and that's going to cause some friction between you as the IT service provider and the customer, and a lot of times that's where that churn happens. Of course, you have a chance for increased revenue because you're selling a more advanced product, so you're going to be able to charge more for it. It is better protection, so you're adding additional layers and you'll be able to charge more for that. You're going to have reduced liability because, of course, you're reducing the number of incidents. The less incidents you have, the less chance of something going wrong, and that reduces your liability as a service provider. You're going to have reduced expenses due to the more efficient service delivery. So just the ability to monitor and deploy and be able to remediate problems quickly is going to make a big difference in terms of your profitability when it comes to efficiency. And then it positions your MSP as more security forward and more security conscious, and that's just going to elevate your reputation among your peers in your geographical area. Okay, so our next poll question: of your current customer base, which segment or group of customers do you think will benefit the most from EDR? And part of the reason why we want to show this is we want to get a good idea of what verticals you guys are dealing with the most, which ones you're looking at as more security conscious, things like that, so that we can, again, drive these solutions to the things that you guys want help with the most.
Right. Sometimes we've heard that this might be that people may only use this kind of solution in particular verticals. So we're sort of testing that theory a little bit. And remember, you can select one or more of the following. So if you've got multiple industries, you can check that.
That's right. And as you can tell, the verticals that we've listed here are some of the ones that really have a lot more regulatory compliance types of criteria around them. But of course, right now, with security being what it is, kind of it's something that a lot of people are looking at as well. Okay, here we go. Some results. Medical healthcare, of course, is always big. Retail is next at 16%, and then legal and government come in there as well. So
it looks like everyone's going broad, though. Most people want to do it with all customers, which is which is interesting to see.
yes, I think it just speaks to how broad the security conversation is amongst all of their customers versus it being as targeted as it was even probably 5 years ago.
Totally.
All right, so that brings us into the next section, which is how to sell next-gen AV. So really what we want to talk about here is how do you create a win-win situation with your customers? What are the benefits of next-gen AV? How do you have that conversation with customers? What are some of the conversation starters? Where are the appropriate places to talk about this? What is the ROI for the MSP? What is the ROI for the customer? What do those numbers look like in terms of customer dollars? And then we have a handout for you. It's in the handout section of the GoToWebinar control panel there, where it is a unbranded presentation that you can present to your customers. And it really talks about the changing threat landscape, gives a lot of statistics that customers are going to be interested in that we think, and then leaves you some room to add, a title slide and a call to action at the end. But it just gives you a good story to tell as you're presenting this to some customers and some prospects. So digging into the benefits a little bit deeper than we did before, of course, reduced downtime with better detection. So downtime, as we know, we have this conversation with customers all the time. about, this is why we do managed services, right? Managed services itself, managed services plans are advantageous to the end customer because it keeps them up and running longer, because every minute that they're down is dollars coming out of their pocket, and dollars not coming in from customers typically. Faster recovery through rollback remediation means if something does happen, there's a much faster path to getting them back up and running quickly. They're protected outside of the network. Larger companies especially have very good perimeters set up around their network. But as a mobile society now and as a mobile workplace, a lot of people have laptops. They take those devices out of the network and they lose some of those layers of protection. Well, the endpoint detection and response gives you better layers of protection at the specific endpoint so that endpoint can travel outside the network and still have a good level of protection on it. It has adaptive and self-learning detection, especially for those zero-day threats, to make sure that you don't have to wait for signature definitions to be downloaded to possibly be protected from those zero-day threats. So how do you have the conversation with your customers about this? Well, for proactive and managed customers, it really should be something that you automatically include. For most of you, this is for if you're doing a proactive or a managed service plan, the price difference between this and legacy AV is going to be so little that it's really not going to affect your margins. And so the recommendation there is just go ahead and put it in your product, tell your customers you're doing it because you're adding this extra level of protection for them. In addition to that, you can also do, mention it in your business reviews. As you're having business reviews, and I hope you're all having business reviews with your customers, this is something as the ongoing education, the evolution of you as a service provider need to be bringing these types of things and these opportunities up to your customers in those business reviews. Obviously, if you're sending out a newsletter, that's a great place to send it as well. Email campaigns, this is, security topics are big, so they're a very good topic for an email campaign. And then, of course, sales calls with prospects. We gave you the deck. You can use that both in your business reviews and in the sales calls to kind of tell that story about why security is important and why new generations of solutions are necessary to deal with the new generations of threats. And then just really educating your customer about, what the new threats are and why they need a better solution to deal with those threats. Okay, so what is the return on investment for you guys as the service providers? Well, minimal impact on your margins. Okay, so if you're selling them true proactive or managed plans, the cost difference here is going to be so small that it's really not going to make a difference in the profit margins of those plans. And then as you get into the renewals of those plans, you just bump that up just a little bit to make sure that your profit margin does go back up to what you had originally designed. But, again, very minimal impact. Decreased churn, we talked about that a little bit before. Churn or security is one of those, probably it is the biggest thing that causes a customer to churn, and you want to do as much as you can to decrease their opportunity to churn away from you. Reduce liability, again, by reducing the number of incidents, and that reduced liability is huge. We're seeing more and more as managed service providers take on more and more of the responsibility for the entire IT infrastructure for a customer, your liability increases. So everything that we can do to help you guys reduce that liability through the tools that we're offering helps you guys with your profit margins overall. And then, of course, again, reduced expenses due to more efficient service delivery, not only in the deployment and the monitoring and the management of the security of those devices, but also the remediation is a huge part of next-gen AV. So by increasing your efficiency, decreasing your liability, you can maintain or increase your profit margins without having to make any big changes to your offerings. Okay, so customer return on investment. How do we talk to customers about this? Well, we do the same story that we talk about when we're talking about managed services and why They should have that in terms of employee productivity. One of the big ones when it comes to security is fines and judgments. This is kind of new, as security has evolved over the last couple of years. There's a lot more regulations. There's a lot more case legal cases that happen around these, and so you're limiting your customers' liability in terms of fines and judgments, both in the legal system as well as regulatory things that they may have to comply with. Lost customers equals lost revenue. So if they're not churning, obviously you're keeping those customers, but also when it comes to breaches and ransomware attacks that affect your customer's business, if they have a problem, they're going to lose business from new customers not being able to do business with them, or possibly in the case of a breach where they have customer data get released or something like that, they could lose customers from that as well. And what goes hand in hand with that is business reputation. A business that has been breached has a very hard time coming back in terms of reputation if that breach is public. And most of the time nowadays, because of the regulations being what they are, it's very hard to not have a breach go public because in terms of society these days, that's just the responsible thing to do. And then the one thing that we never want to see out of any customers is an extinction event. And there's a staggering, sobering statistic around this. According to the National Cybersecurity Alliance, 60% of small and mid-sized businesses that are hacked go out of business within 6 months. And I was lucky enough when I had my MSP and ransomware was just becoming a thing, we had good backup solutions, so we never had an issue with that. But it's really a tough thing to deal with to see that kind of number exists when we're talking about extinction events for small to medium-sized businesses. Okay, so let's talk about the numbers a little bit. Let's go over the stats first. So 56%, that's a little more than half of the decision makers within a small to medium-sized business report that a ransomware attack affected their organization. So that means half of your customers on average have reported some type of consequence with a ransomware attack. That's a big number. And then 67% of SMBs were affected by ransomware attacks in 2018. That's a relatively new number that we were just able to get, and that's a huge number as well. Now, whether they were personally affected or affected by their supply chain somehow, but it's still a really big number. So what are the costs to return to normal? So if we go back to the statistic that we talked about earlier, where Cisco said that 1 in 4 devices were probably going to be affected in some way in 2018, that's 25% of, say, a client that has 40 devices, that's 10 devices. 10 devices by an hour to remediate at $100 an hour is $1,000. That's not a huge number. It's not a great number, but it's not a huge number. The worst one is if you end up having to pay that ransom at an average of $1,466 per device. That brings you to a total cost of $15,660. And that is a huge pill for a business of that size, a business that only has 40 devices, to swallow in the case of some type of ransomware attack. And this doesn't even include the lost sales, the productivity, or employee salaries that they're also going to experience if they have an event of this type. So, like I said, we did create a downloadable PowerPoint for you. There's the link, there's a handout in the GoToWebinar, so I urge you to go ahead and download that now. And it just goes through the story of, why threats are getting more frequent, why it's costing more money, that threats have gained the ability to morph and not be recognized by traditional AV, and then what the new solutions are that you as a provider are going to be able to give them to minimize their risk, their downtime, and of course, most importantly, their financial impact. Okay, so we have a quick demo here. And this is just going to show you the rollback ability of the solution. Now you notice I just have a Windows desktop here, and I've got some files over there in the corner that you'll be able to see. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to just show that there are no existing threats on this machine. So there we go. We can see that. And then the next thing is I want to show you that we are currently up to date on our patches for this machine. So I'm going to copy and paste a file onto the desktop here that is a known virus. And there we go. It went ahead and killed and quarantined it. That's why it disappeared. And you notice we got the notification that the threat was detected. So let's go ahead and go into the EDR dashboard and we'll pull up that threat. And there's a lot of information that we can see. We can see where it was, what it was called, what IP address the device is at, what the hash was for that device, and of course, what the indicators of threat were that we used to determine that that was a threat. Now we're going to go and we're going to change the policy so that we're only detecting the threats. We're not killing and quarantine the threats. And this is so that I can actually have the device, have the malware infect the device, encrypt those files, and then show you the rollback. And I'm going to change this file a little bit. So I'm changing it so that it doesn't match the original signature. So I'm obfuscating the signature or the hash of this file so it's not a known virus in terms of signatures. And then I'm going to copy and paste it again to my desktop. You notice I still detect it as a threat, but I'll go ahead and run it anyway. And as many end users will, I'll go ahead and click on yes. And this is where you start seeing stuff happen. So you notice I get some crypto files there. It encrypts my pictures over there on the right. And it changes my desktop so that I know how to contact the criminal in terms of getting my files recovered. Of course, it pops up all of these nice instructions so that I can pay them my Bitcoin and, of course, try and get my files back. Let's go back into the EDR dashboard, take a look at how we'd roll this back. So I'm going to click on the threat and go to Actions and choose Rollback. Then go back to my desktop. And you'll start seeing things disappear. You'll start seeing the files over on the right-hand side get unencrypted. And then lastly, my desktop wallpaper is restored. So as you can see, very quick to do that, very easy to do that. Of course, you don't even have to do a truck roll. It can all be done from the office. So it makes it a very nice and convenient and efficient way to deal with some of these threats. All right, now, if that hasn't whet your appetite enough, then you can go ahead and sign up for a live demo. We are doing a series of live demos with the sales engineers so that you can ask them your technical questions. So there's a link in the chat window, or you can go ahead and just type demo into the questions box, and that will make its way to your account rep so that they can go ahead and get you set up for that. If you're ready to start a trial, go ahead and type trial into the Q&A panel, and that way we'll also have your account manager follow up with you. The way you do set up a trial is you contact your account manager and they will walk you through the process of getting set up on your trial. All right, Dave, I assume we have some questions.
We do, and so there's a bunch that are coming in, and so I've been grouping them. Let's start with the number one. People want to know about pricing.
All right, and of course, I have to give you the standard answer. Because we work in so many different geos and there's so many different, currency denominations, we really have to forward you to your account manager for this. So go ahead and get some time set up with your account manager and they can go over the pricing structure with you.
Gotcha. So that's that. We've got a bunch of different people, so I'm consolidating a few different questions. So people have
Sure.
asked it in different ways. But the first is, what about the integrations with N-Central and with RMM? Does this integrate? How's that work? What's that look like?
So we are looking at doing those in the future in terms of a full integration. But the good thing is right now, we're very close to releasing a set of scripts, both for N-Central as well as RMM, that will allow you to completely deploy the solution um, to devices through the RMM and N-Central dashboards. Those should be out, I'm hoping within about a week.
Gotcha. So the next one that people are asking, several people have asked about, like, so can I drop Bitdefender? Does this run side by side? Is this intended to be, something that you replace? How do I use this? I've got a number of different questions that look like that.
Okay, so this is another AV solution. And so with any other AV solution, you're typically not going to run them side by side. So you're going to, replace one with the other. It is possible to run them side by side, but like having two AVs side by side, you have to do some excluding and some special configuration to make sure that they're not fighting against each other.
Perfect. I think that's that. So the next one is people are asking about what does this run on servers or does it just for workstations? How can I deploy this? That's what they're asking next.
So you run it on both. So it is applicable to both, right? Because you're going to see virus activity on servers and workstations, so you want to protect both. Um, the other thing is that in terms of deployment, even if you're not going to use the scripts that are going to be available for N-Central or RMM, deployment is very simple. Within the EDR dashboard, there is a packages screen where you can download the different Windows packages or a Mac or a Linux agent, which is probably another question that's going to come up soon, is what platforms does this support? And it supports Windows 7 up to the current Windows versions. It supports Mac and it supports Linux.
Gotcha. So we've answered all of those. For those that are asking specific product comparison questions, we're not answering those here on the webinar. We appreciate your interest. We encourage you to have a conversation with your rep. Again, if you would like to do that, go ahead and let us know that you can either ask to go right to a trial by putting in trial there in the questions piece, or if you want to sign up for one of those demos, go ahead and put demo into the question piece, and we can go from there. So this isn't positioned as a virus removal tool, though, is it, Eric? It has to be there first, right?
Well, yes, like any other traditional AV solution, that it needs to be on there before it can be protecting those files, watching for registry entries to roll back, encrypted files to roll back, those types of things. So it does need to be there first. It doesn't have you can do scans with it, but that's not the general idea around having a next gen AV.
Gotcha. That makes perfect sense. Again, and some people are asking some questions that are specific questions around, the way it works in particular network configurations. I'm going to encourage those people to get on those calls with the sales engineers to go a little bit more deep into that, because some of these questions are we appreciate your specificity, but they're really specific for this time frame. Now, tell us, you want to go a little bit more into detail on kind of what's required from the shadow copies and where the backups are they backups? How is that kind of stuff done? Can you tell a little bit more there?
So yes, and I want to make this point, and I think I may have forgotten to make this point specifically during the webinar. This is not, and I repeat, not a replacement for backup. You're still going to want to have your backup as that final layer of protection for your data. However, there is, you do want to protect, make sure that those files are easily restored through the rollback process. And so there's some things that you want to do in terms of configuring your VSS writer and your shadow copy to make sure that's all working efficiently. And we do have a knowledge base article on that's available through the Success Center. Or if you're talking to a sales engineer or your account rep, they can provide you with that as well.
Gotcha. I'm getting the one question around, is there a Mac version?
There is. I have it running
Awesome.
on my MacBook Air.
Great. So talk a little bit. People are asking, what are we thinking around integration? What can you talk about to that today?
I do not have any specifics on that today.
Okay.
Obviously, the goal is to provide you guys with something that's more tightly integrated with both the N Central and the RMM platforms. That would be the broad overarching goal. But in terms of details, I just don't have any from the product management team.
Gotcha. It makes sense. So
Yeah,
somebody here has asked, does rollback on client machines also roll back changes on file servers?
that would be a question for the sales engineers.
Okay, gotcha. That's one that went that one extra level of depth there.
Yeah,
Um,
I've demoed this on my Mac device, my Linux device, and as well as some Windows machines. But I have not demoed this on in a server environment where I could test that out.
Gotcha. For those of you then that are asking server support questions, we'll direct you to please go ahead and sign up for that demo group with the sales engineers. You want to go a little bit further, that's going to be exactly the right time to do that. For those again that are asking questions around things like script configurations and changing settings and those kinds of things, again, I'm going to direct you. Go ahead and sign up for one of those demos. We'll make sure to get you into those. There are also links to sign up for those live EDR demos right within the chat window. You can click on either of those to find a time or date that suits your schedule. If you're interested in diving right in and want to get your hands on the software, you can put trial into the question area, and we will be taking care of it there by following up and can get you a specific opportunity to try the product. So for those, for additional questions, keep them coming in. I'm going to start sorting here. Anything, Eric? Is there stuff you haven't covered from that perspective you want to address while I dig into a couple of these questions?
Oh, well, probably one of the things I want to talk about just real quickly is how easy it is to drop the EDR agent onto a device, uh, and how easy the interface is to use. It's very simple to get started and trial this product. You do, like we talked about before when we were talking about whether you should use these side by side, you do, for testing purposes, want to pull any other AV product that's on the device off before you start trialing the EDR product on the device, just because you want to make sure you have the best experience, right? And we don't want to have to be going through extra configuration steps in order to, get you the best trial experience with that.
Gotcha. A few people have been asking about how heavy the endpoint is, or how much processor is required, how much load is put on the workstation. Do you want to address that?
Sure, because it's an interesting answer, because they work differently. It's kind of a little bit of a trade-off. So with traditional AV, a lot of your performance issues come from the fact that every time you have a new set of definitions, you really need to do another scan in order to find any malware that was downloaded but not detected by the old signatures. So, it's recommended, at least with critical file areas, that you probably do that once a day, and that's not even a deep scan. The deep scans take even longer and consume more resources. Now, the advantage to the EDR product is that it doesn't have to do those scans every time it gets new signatures, because it's so much better at the 0-day detection, because it's not only looking for file signatures, but it's also looking for processes that go bad. So even if something is not recognized by the signatures, it can be detected, killed, and remediated without that.
Gotcha. Again, I will continue to give everyone a opportunity for some of these last minute questions. If yours hasn't been answered, please go ahead and dive in there. Again, if it's super technical, I'm going to be directing everyone to those demos. Go ahead and sign up within the chat window. You can click and find a specific date and time right by clicking on the links in chat. Additionally, if you want us just to reach out, you can put in demo into the question space and we will reach out and offer you options there. If you want to dive right into a trial and get your hands on the software, go ahead and put that into the questions area as a trial, and we will follow up that way. If you're asking questions about how you reach your SolarWinds rep, just let us know, and we will be following up to make sure you get connected with your rep right there. We know sometimes you lose track of that. If you're interested, there's information on getting working with us right within the Customer Success Center. Go to SolarWindsMSP.com, click on Contact Support, and we've got information there both on reaching us as well as around your reps. So for those that are asking around Bitdefender, it is not a legacy product. We are not ending support, and it is still something that we intend to use for you to use in complementary natures with this. Isn't that right, Eric?
Yes, because some of your client needs are going to be different, right? So there's still going to be some customers who are a right fit for the Bitdefender AV product, and then you're going to have customers who are the right fit for the EDR product. Now, something that I did want to mention, going back to kind of the ease of use, I have talked to some MSPs who are a little bit hesitant to get into a deeper security model because they think it's more complicated. This EDR product, in my opinion, brings a level of security functionality to an MSP who's not quite ready to make that jump to MSSP. So I don't want anybody to be hindered or cautious about starting a trial because they think it might be a little over the top for them, because it's not. It's a very tech-friendly product to use. So I would suggest, if you're interested at all, and I think, from what we've seen, a lot of people are, go ahead and sign up for that trial so you can get your hands on it and see what it does.
Awesome. I will leave these. We're going to continue taking the questions again. If you are interested in getting more information, 2 easy ways to do that. The first is sign up for a demo with one of our sales engineers. You can get an opportunity to work in a small group, get some questions answered. You can go into the chat and click on the link there and go ahead and specifically choose a date and time that works for you. Or if interested, just go ahead and put in demo into the question area, and we will follow up to schedule one with you. Additionally, if you want to get your hands on the software, go ahead and just put trial into the questions, and we will reach out to make sure that you get an active trial of that. So again, for those that are asking, yes, there will be a recording of this available. We'll do it in the follow-up email so that you can get access to this full recording and additionally links on all of these kinds of information to follow up. I think, Eric, we're kind of reaching the ends of those little questions. Really do appreciate your time and giving everybody this real detail. I think we'll hang out for a couple of moments just to make sure there's no last questions. But you have any sort of final thoughts?
One thing I would say is make sure that you download the handout so that you have that presentation to put in front of your customers to help guide that conversation with your customers. I think this is something that most MSPs will find is going to be very easy to upgrade their security game with. Like I said, just the ease of use and the relevancy to a lot of their different clients is going to make it a win-win situation and just a no-brainer for a lot of their customers.
Awesome. Well, Eric, we really do appreciate your time today, and thank all of you for spending some time with us, and hope this was really helpful. We do like to make sure you get all those information. Again, last time, if you want to get a demo, go ahead and click on the link, and you can specifically pick a time or date that suits your schedule. If you just put demo into the questions, we will follow up there specifically. If you want to get your hands on the software, just put trial into the question area, and we'll do that as well. You'll get a copy of the recording. Will come in the follow-up email, and we really do appreciate your time. We look forward to seeing you on the next SolarWinds MSP webinar.